How does working with Espresso and their design help Arbitrum move closer to stage 2?
Because you don't need multiple rounds of messages to pass between the rollups within the span of one block time.
Is changing the sequencer critical to achieving synchronous composability across L2s?
And it's good if we have multiple sovereign networks plug into the same messaging interface, because that means they'll all have more usage, right?
It's a loaded question there, yeah.
Welcome back to the Rollup, your home for technical talks and open conversations that shape the modular future. Nothing on today's show is to be construed as financial advice. You can see our full disclosures list at therollup.co/ventures. Sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode after a quick word from some of our awesome partners.
SAFE is moving the world's GDP on-chain. With the introduction of SafeNet, SAFE is taking this to the next step very soon. Check out net.safe.global to learn more about how SAFE is moving the world's GDP on-chain.
All right, we're live at Arbiverse in Bangkok. Hope everyone's stayed clear of food poisoning and has survived the bikes. I think the bikes are the only way to get around. I'm 2 for 2 so far, knock on wood. How are we all doing today?
Pretty good, yeah. I'm 3 for 3, so hopefully we can keep it going, you know?
I think I'm 2 for 2. Yeah, how do you hold on to the bike? Do you hold on at all?
Yeah, I'm gonna just grab onto the back, white knuckles,
Right.
full squeeze.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been bear hugging the driver, but as I get more comfortable,
You start to pull off of it.
pull off a bit.
I think there's a logical progression from taking a car, which is like transacting on mainnet during an NFT mint, and then to like going onto the bike, which is like a smooth Arbitrum experience or something like that.
We got the tuk-tuks in the middle there, which is like an alternative
Side
layer
chain.
one,
It's
yeah.
a little like, oh, what's the security?
All right, yeah. No helmet. I see.
Well, guys, welcome on. Matt, it's definitely your first time. Ben, we've chatted before. This might be your first time actually on a podcast, so I'm not sure.
I feel like I've been on a roll-up before, but you know what?
I'm not sure.
Not sure.
Maybe I've. Quick intro would be fantastic, guys, and then we can jump right in. So Matt, why don't you start?
Yeah, so my name's Matt. I run the product department at Off-Chain Labs. Been here for around 3 years, so kind of seen a lot of the journey of the Arbitrum. Both chains and the ecosystem have taken over the last few years. I'm really excited. Before crypto, I was working at Google, doing traditional tech stuff, kind of saw the issues you see with centralization of power, wanted to make a move. So here I am.
Welcome. What's up, Ben?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm Ben Fisch. I'm co-founder and CEO of Espresso. Espresso is sort of made its mission to make all Ethereum rollups composable, bringing better interoperability to the L2 space. We see sort of the tension between composability and scalability as like the key thing that the space needs to solve. And that starts with kind of what we want to launch today, which is sort of a fast confirmation system that can confirm transactions, with strong security but pre-L1 finality time, and helps various operators in the space be able to confirm the information that's on different chains.
Sweet, and congratulations on mainnet, Ben, for Espresso. Big accomplishment. I know you guys are working very closely with Arbitrum in a myriad of ways, which we'll touch on. But I think to kind of set the stage, guys, we're at this place where we've unbundled Ethereum, this kind of monolithic L1 that did all the properties of a blockchain in one, and it really shifted execution to rollups. That's like kind of like the rollup-centric roadmap at its core. We've heard this a lot, that a consequence of this has been the fragmentation of liquidity and users, amongst other things. And so now we're kind of, as a community, coming together to try to figure out how to build interoperability. And so one notion that I've been pushing forward, and that I think a lot of people in the community have been agreeing with, is that the future of interoperability for Ethereum is going to be on neutral grounds. It's some sort of standardization, some sort of neutral capacity where a team can come in, or teams, and provide the best solutions. Right now, there's different incentives at play for teams to build interoperability solutions that best suit them. I'm starting to view this as a collaborative kind of mission amongst many teams. And so just with that framing in mind, I'm curious how you guys are thinking about broadly Ethereum interoperability, and like what is the right way that we and the community should be thinking about interoperability within the Ethereum ecosystem. Ben, maybe you can start, and then we can hear from you, Matt.
Sure.
Yeah, it's a loaded question there. Yeah. Ethereum, I mean, and I'll get into why. So, interoperability, first of all, and sort of composability or interoperability can take on various forms, right? Everything from just simple bridging of assets between different chains to asynchronous interactions between chains where chains will actually pass each other messages and wait for some response, so enter some intermediary state of an application that then waits for a message back, to full-on synchronous composability, which is the kind of composability that you have between applications today on Ethereum. And each of these levels of composability or interoperability unlocks different capabilities for applications, but it also presents its own challenges in terms of and trade-offs for L2s if they were to say be synchronously composable with each other versus just being able to bridge assets. So I think the right way to think about space, which is your question, right, is to be able to explore the full spectrum of possibilities, cleanly understand the best way to achieve these different types of interoperability with the least amount of trade-offs possible, and to provide infrastructure that enables chains to then kind of make their own choices.
Matt, anything to
Yeah,
add?
sure. I mean, I would say maybe starting on the point of neutrality. I mean, one of the defining characteristics of, I think, blockchains that make them useful to people, and especially Ethereum, is this notion of credible neutrality, which is arbitrary, right? Like it's something that is decided by the user. But I think that, to Ben's point, on Ethereum today, you don't think about interoperability because everything just works together. You can call contracts in real time. You can make atomic swaps in real time. And so now that we've seen a fragmentation, I think for good reason, of execution environments with different rollups, with many orbit chains in the Arbitrum ecosystem, different application teams want sovereignty over their users. They want sovereignty over their application customizations. They want to be able to maybe capture value or use that value in a different way than maybe a larger protocol team might want to, or a DAO. Maybe they have their own DAO. So because of all these things, because of all these desire for customization, you have a problem where you lose some of that kind of synchronous composability you've seen in Ethereum, and so now we need to find a way to make interoperability, possible. I hate to run it back, but that's kind of, at least my perspective. I think the importance of neutrality, it will remain, but to Ben's point, there are a lot of solutions in the space. Each one has their own set of trade-offs, right? You have maybe more centralized solutions that are faster, more decentralized solutions that are slower, but obviously more secure for some reasons. And so the importance of neutrality, I think, remains to be seen in the interoperability space, because fundamentally you're just kind of relaying messages, and it's only a component of many of the pieces of an execution environment or a smart contract system. So it kind of remains to be seen, but I think it's important.
Yeah, and I think we've came a long way. There's obviously still a lot of work to do, but from my understanding now with Espresso on mainnet, this is no longer an engineering problem. This is more so an incentive or a social coordination thing to solve. Is that the right way to think about this, or?
Well, I
can
will
see
say
your face.
Well, Espresso's on mainnet, but there's still a lot to, Espresso's mainnet today is a fast confirmation layer, and that, in my view, is the backbone of interoperability protocols that can be built on top from asynchronous to synchronous. But there are still a lot of things that need to happen to, say, for example, get L2s to be synchronously composable. We actually just we're in the process of writing a standard for something we call coordinated interop communication, which is a standard that can handle both synchronous and asynchronous communication. I mean, there's other standards being written as well. There's a lot of work to be done still, to be built on top of things like Espresso. So I wouldn't say that just because Espresso is on mainnet today that we've solved interoperability.
Yeah, I think like the neutrality position there and what Rob was getting at is more of this idea of there's been this notion that why should Arbitrum opt out of their single sequencer model, which for various reasons, Arbitrum's working towards stage 2, and Espresso's a part of kind of this decentralizing the sequencer model. If you're giving up ownership or revenue or attribution or these kind of various properties that you get by having a single sequencer model. And so the neutrality part of this, I think, is more like, are the incentives aligned for rollups to opt into something like Espresso? And I think part of that is why Espresso's branding, amongst other kind of shared sequencers, have kind of like repositioned a little bit because, again, like if a rollup is going to opt into a model, there has to be at least some sort of large gain if there's going to be a economic loss or some sort of like other kind of loss that is currently handled by a single sequencer. Yeah.
So the Espresso network today is not a shared sequencer, actually.
Right.
The Espresso network today is a fast confirmation layer, as we call it. Some people think of this as fast finality layer as well, and it doesn't replace sequencers. So we're integrating a bunch of Arbitrum orbit chains, for example, in the coming months, and they will each have their own centralized sequencer still. When it comes to decentralizing a sequencer, you can think of it as in two parts. One is to diversify the party that's actually proposing transactions, right? The other is to create a more robust protocol for confirming the transactions that have been sequenced before they're published to the L1, right? And so it's that second part that Espresso Network provides today. You can have a centralized sequencer that publishes blocks to Espresso. Espresso reaches consensus on them and ensures that the blocks that are eventually published to the L1 are consistent. And what this enables is it enables anyone to be able to quickly confirm what transactions have completed on a rollup that's connected to Espresso, and we can get into it more, but that's the backbone for interoperability protocol. So there really isn't sort of an economic issue or question of like replacing the sequencer. It's not really about the sequencer itself. We can get into like what rollups might want to do if they want to use shared sequencers, which are necessary for synchronous composability. But just for being able to asynchronously compose or just like enable solvers to bridge faster, integrating with Espresso is a great way to enhance that, and it doesn't touch at all the economics of the chain.
I appreciate the clarity. I think that's a good segue into this standards conversation as well. Did you want to add something to that?
Well, I guess I don't think either of us are trying to pigeonhole Espresso here. It's like I think the goal at the end of the day is synchronous composability across the Ethereum ecosystem, and I just want to like really clarify that like even my own just technical understanding changing the sequencer critical to achieving synchronous composability across L2s.
Yeah, so synchronous composability, it's an amazing capability, and it's something that we have in the EVM. So I just want to start out by saying that I don't know that all rollups everywhere are going to be synchronously composable, but you may just have synchronously composable clusters. But yes, while in theory it is possible to achieve synchronous composability without a shared sequencer, you do need some form of coordination. And the most straightforward, I don't want to get we could go down a huge rabbit hole of how you could have coordination between sequencers without sharing the sequencer and what the difference is between them. But the main point is that in order to synchronously compose, you need to construct the blocks of the two rollups in a way that they can sort of pass multiple rounds of messages between each other or do something that effectively emulates that. One way of doing that is through the protocol that we propose called CIRC, where you have basically mailboxes on the two different chains, and this coordinator or shared sequencer basically populates the inboxes of the two chains with multiple rounds of messages that they should be receiving. And so the chains just sort of carry out the transcript of the conversation without actually sending messages to each other, reliant on the shared sequencer for doing that. So that is why shared sequencers or some kind of coordinator in the block construction process is necessary for synchronous composability. For asynchronous, you don't need that because you don't need multiple rounds of messages to pass between the rollups within the span of one block time.
Yeah,
got it.
I appreciate that clarity. I think it also ties back to the previous point with regards to how Espresso's fast finality kind of layer, if you will, also further enhances things like intent-based interop.
Yeah.
It provides solvers with a much faster way of basically being able to take less inventory risk. And so there's a really popular standard that actually Arbitrum has just opted into and endorsed, which is ERC 7683. That is an intent-based interop standard. And so my original question was if this was at all competitive with what is happening here, but it really seems like it's actually a perfect match for something like Espresso's fast finality. So how would that kind of interoperate in this ecosystem?
Sure. I mean, I'll start from our end. I think 7683 is just one of many examples of improving the developer experience of working with blockchains. I mean, you started out with a language and a node software, and now we have different types of chains, right? And so this is, I would say, kind of a standard interface for using solver networks. There's so many when you look at the different types of solutions available today in the market, which is great for chains to be able to communicate to each other, particularly transfer tokens between each other quickly, have someone else take on that risk and be able to, rebalance quickly is something that they'll be able to use Espresso for. But I think this is just a standard. I think standards are good. More standards can be better if there is a meaningful trade-off between them. But for now, we're seeing, particularly with calling these solver networks, if there's a rally around this one or a one, which we are seeing with 7683, that's good. That makes it easier for developers to use kind of the same types of contracts across different chains. It's easy to kind of debug new systems that we build. And it's good if we have multiple solver networks plug into the same messaging interface, because that means they'll all have more usage, right? And that means liquidity is kind of moving in the same way, hopefully being managed by a more diverse party set because you don't have fragmentation of how you call them. I think it's good. I think it doesn't solve everything, We have a lot of more work to be done, but it's exciting. And Arbitrum, I think, came forward with support for this over the last couple of days, so we're excited about that.
Yeah, awesome. And to add to that, I think one thing that's, like when it comes to talking about standards, I think one thing that maybe people miss a bit in the conversation is that there's a difference between proposing a standard and proposing a protocol. These protocols actually already exist. There's many intent-based bridges today, and it's the most common way of bridging between chains. And so the main point of a standard is asking the question, why should they all conform to the same format, for example? And when it comes to ERC 7683, the answer there is, well, solvers, these liquidity providers, are working with all these different protocols. For the ecosystem to work in the smoothest way possible, you want to enable solvers to work with as many of these protocols in a seamless way as possible. You also want wallets to be able to integrate with them, as many of them as in the easiest way possible. And so by standardizing, the APIs that the solvers need to integrate with, that the wallets need to integrate with, you make all of this work much better. When it comes to whether solver-based bridges solve all our interoperability problems, right? Then the answer there is no. That doesn't mean ERC 7683 isn't a great thing, or that these solver-based bridges aren't a great thing. They are. It's just that they're only scratching the surface in terms of what you can do to solve fragmentation.
Do you see them as potentially going down a divergent path to that end goal, or could we use those as a stepping stone to some of our bigger picture
Yeah,
goals?
it's all complementary. I mean, solver-based bridges are built on top of, they're also built on top of message passing, right? Solver-based bridges are a great way to move assets from an end user perspective. You're not actually moving the assets between the chains, but from an end user perspective, you are giving them assets on one chain. And so for relatively low volume, bridging, for use cases that aren't really, trying to solve liquidity fragmentation or things like that, solver-based bridging works great. Right? What it doesn't solve is if you want to move, huge sums of assets between chains, then it's extremely capitally inefficient because the solvers need to hold enough sufficiently high reserves in the different chains, and it doesn't address liquidity fragmentation, which is one of the reasons why we talk about bridging being so important in the first place, is that if you have a DEX in every different chain and you're splitting liquidity between the different chains, then DeFi doesn't work as well. If you want to enable chains to specialize and to have one chain that concentrates liquidity and another chain that concentrates the NFTs and another chain that does something else, then you need to solve bridging in a way that doesn't rely on solvers that also split their liquidity across the different chains.
Yep. I appreciate that perspective. Kind of to hone in on the Espresso and Arbitrum collaboration that has been in the works and research for some time, and now coming more and more publicly and just more and more implementation. One key subject for all of the roll-up teams is basically moving from stage 0 on L2B to stage 1 to stage 2. Arbitrum being very, very notable in the fraud-proof research design, and looking to make the jump to stage 2 at some point in the future. Obviously, it's kind of like a slow and steady process. With that kind of framing, how does working with Espresso and their design help Arbitrum move closer to stage 2? And kind of what does that look like from your perspective, Matt?
Redstone modular oracles are available on 50 plus chains, trusted by over 100 clients and over 6 billion in total value secured. Visit redstone.finance to find out more. Welcome aboard on our journey into the singularity. This is the endgame roadmap for Frax and Fraxtal, the new L2 out of the Frax ecosystem that is totally based on fractal scaling. Fraxtal is a modular L2 blockchain built by Frax with modular and fractal scaling in mind. Fractal scaling is based on the Mandelbrot set of fractal images, and it explains how L2s become L3s and the entire app chain lifecycle goes through its evolution. The Frax ecosystem is made of some of the top builders in the space and has stemmed from its OG days of the Frax stablecoin. It is now in the LST space, the LRT space, and this Fraxtal L2 joins the existing suite of Frax products, including Frax Swap and Frax Lend. You can see Frax Ferry, the bridge to go from any chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, or mainnet into the Fraxtal mainnet. Bridge your tokens and bring your Frax assets into the Fraxtal ecosystem. Join today to get the best out of Fraxtal. You are still early. Join today. Take part in our expedition into the singularity.
It's a good question. So again, I represent Off-Chain Labs. I'm obviously one of the early developers of Arbitrum, but there's a whole DAO, there's a lot of stakeholders. I think for many chains, working with a protocol like Espresso is really good, actually. I can't comment on how much it will affect stage 2, just because I don't have the rubric right next to me, and I haven't memorized it, to be transparent. But I do think that a critical aspect of what at least the new mainnet implementation is enabling is having kind of another set of parties look at what the sequencer said it ordered and is going to post, and whether or not it actually did post what it said it was going to, right? And so this is kind of a way of adding one of the properties that folks are curious about with something like a distributed sequencer, but without actually doing that and adding all of the latency effects that something like that would have in a current version that we would be able to ship today. So now you have this other set of parties kind of looking at what the ordering commitment was, kind of doing their own manual validation, making sure that things were actually correct, signing an attestation, posting that on chain, and having proof that they did their job. That's actually good. There is a cost, right? But to have this set of parties actually run these pieces of software, there's a cost that comes about that. But you get this nice primitive, which is, okay, now you don't just have this one party ordering and block building and having to wait all the way till L1 finality to have confirmation and have a good feeling about this actually being final. You have another set of intermediary node operators that are running essentially a different version of the same protocol, right, and giving you additional confirmation over that block. And so it allows parties to, just like solvers can if they want to, move more quickly with a better guarantee. And that's really cool, right? And I think, I don't know exactly how this contributes to stage 2, but I would argue that having a gadget like this is actually a beneficial property for a lot of chains. It is good from a decentralization perspective and should be considered as part of that rubric.
Yeah, maybe just add one thing. We often talk about things through the perspective of, is it stage 1, is it stage 2, and like all these kind of categories that we create. There's a lot of things. Right. It feels like the sort of the space is kind of religious in that way, but
it's good It's good branding for L2B.
Yes.
I'll tell you that.
It's effective. Yeah.
No, but what I wanted to say is that sometimes it's important to look at things from just a pragmatic perspective. What does this do differently for the chains? Okay, and so to illustrate what Matt is saying in a very concrete way, think about a real concrete risk that centralized sequencers face today, which is that even if the centralized sequencer is perfectly honest, right, everyone can get hacked. Right? Mm-hmm. And so what can happen if a sequencer gets hacked? What is the damage that can happen? If the sequencer is being relied upon for its confirmations, say by these solver-based bridges, right? And there are millions of dollars of ETH that are being bridged from say Arbitrum to some other ecosystem because of this, then now someone who hacks into the Arbitrum sequencer and causes it to kind of reverse transactions that it previously confirmed before it actually posted them to the L1 can now steal a lot of money. And so it not only creates damage, but it also creates an incentive for somebody to hack the system. If that Arbitrum sequencer is now, connected to the Espresso network, and the hacker would have to hack the entire Espresso network in order to carry out this attack, now you're a lot safer, right? So it's not just about being able to say you're stage 1 or stage 2. It's also about trying to defend against concrete attacks that actually do happen in practice. If you look at the Ronin Bridge hack or any of these hacks, it's always, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 parties getting hacked and causing damage, usually in some kind of bridging protocol.
And so then to even further extrapolate that for Espresso, how does the Espresso's technical design kind of come into this? And maybe you could explain that a bit deeper. I know that we touched on it with regards to this Arbitrum collaboration.
Yeah. So the way that Espresso works today is the sequencer of a chain, whether that sequencer is decentralized or centralized, will post its transaction blocks will publish them on Espresso. And when that sequencer then goes to publish those blocks on Ethereum, it has to publish the same thing that it published to Espresso. And that's enforced by the L1 itself, right? By the settlement contract of the chain. This can be done at the L1 level, it can be done at the L2 level. So today, for example, a number of orbit chains are going to be using Espresso on top of Arbitrum 1. So there are L3s on Arbitrum 1, but there's a contract on Arbitrum 1 that ensures that whatever the sequencers publish to Espresso has to be what gets settled to Arbitrum 1. And so that's how it works, how it enables these fast confirmations. On top of which faster messaging protocols, by the way, could be built. And it's something that we are even building for orbit chains within the Arbitrum ecosystem. But we have a second very important collaboration, which is on sequencer decentralization of course, pending a DAO vote and everything, the Arbitrum 1 sequencer. And this is the time boost collaboration, where a time boost is a protocol that's run today by the centralized sequencer of Arbitrum 1. This will be a decentralized version of that, which will involve not hundreds, but just tens of nodes that are running a protocol that has some really, really nice properties in terms of MEV protection and while preserving some of the very key properties of that Arbitrum has today, which is being able to confirm transactions really quickly and move at high throughput.
And for the searchers listening, Time Boost is actually not an operation just yet, but the snapshot has passed. The on-chain vote is coming soon. I think a lot of interesting stuff to come in distributed ordering policies. I think this is something that we could probably have a whole other conversation on, but I'm really excited for that.
I'm holding back, on asking and diving down these rabbit holes because just adding nodes to the network is going to protect security. I want to know how you're able to provide faster confirmations by adding more nodes to the network. Because maybe that's a simpler question than I would have imagined.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure if I said that. I didn't mean to say that. So Espresso Network. Espresso Network today it doesn't do the sequencing for any of the orbit chains that use it, and it doesn't yet. It's not yet integrated with Arbitrum 1, although we will be proposing to the DAO to integrate Arbitrum 1 as well with Espresso Network. That will likely do that in conjunction with a proposal to move to decentralized time boost, right? But decentralizing the set of nodes that are proposing transactions and doing that in a way that's has good MEV protection and other nice properties and makes things work efficiently is a separate problem from what the Espresso network does, which is ensuring that whatever was sequenced by this relatively small set of nodes can't be changed once it's confirmed. And so Espresso network today, runs also just on around 100 nodes. We're going to try to expand that to around 1,000 nodes, but there'll be kind of a longer timeline for that to happen. More importantly, we're moving to a proof-of-stake model where there will be economic security behind these confirmations. And so to your question of does more nodes make things happen faster? No, but more nodes may add security to the fast consensus that's being reached on these blocks.
Is it fair to say then, as like a summation of this, that Espresso is acting as this surveillance layer for the integrity of Arbitrum 1 block posting to the L1? Is that like a fair way to think about it?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, but
yeah.
when a chain integrates Espresso, it's making changes to the way that its settlement contract works.
Okay, right.
So that, you can think of the sequencer of a chain as sort of, embodying two different roles, right? And you're now kind of splitting out one of those roles. And so you are taking some power away from the sequencer. You're taking away its power to change its mind. Right. And so, which is a good thing, right? They shouldn't be changing their mind, right?
That's right.
So what you are, the caveat, of course, is that you're creating a liveness risk, right? Because now the sequencer has to publish the block to Espresso before it publishes it to Ethereum. Right, so if Espresso were to lose liveness, that can create a temporary stall in the liveness of the chain.
But you guys have taken measures to prevent
Of
any
course,
kind of
yeah.
liveness
Our whole
downtime.
thing is building consensus that works well, confirms transactions quickly, can scale to many, many nodes and have high economic security without losing liveness.
And so how have you guys been able to go on mainnet without economic stake now, and then transition to that later? But like, what is the mechanism here and now, and then with a proof of stake model that I think is more well understood, like that you'll transition.
Well, what we're doing now is well understood as well. It's just it's a permission network.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So we work with about 10 or so sort of professional node operators running 100 geo-distributed nodes around the world. We're going to both open up this operator set to be non-permission and also transition to a proof of stake model, which will involve economic security.
Just to kind of close this out here, Matt, from the Off-Chain Labs perspective, when looking at Arbitrum and doing a lot of research and development that contributes to Arbitrum and the broader DAO, how important are these measures to Off-Chain Labs to continuously iterate on the core ethoses of crypto, decentralization, censorship, resistance, these types of properties when thinking about building out the future of Arbitrum?
They're the number one priority, right? Like, our mission is to scale Ethereum, and if you look at what Ethereum is about, it's all of the things you just listed, right? I think security is paramount. At the current moment, right, I mean, you see across not just the Arbitrum 1 permission validator set that is actually soon to become permissionless, but across a lot of protocols in the industry, there's still guardrails in place, right? Because fundamentally, you want a distributed system, but you also got real money on the line right now. And so you have to make sure there are people who know what they're doing running these very novel systems, right? I mean, the fact that there's on-chain executable governance for Arbitrum 1, that's crazy. Right, I mean, this is the first of its kind. It's amazing. It's super
Arbitrum
cool.
DAO is like a superpower.
It's amazing, and it's new, and hopefully it'll continue to evolve. It will, but I think for us, we care a lot about taking the time to iteratively improve on each of the things that you mentioned. It's a slow process, but I mean, we talked about all of the, not all of them, but a lot of the idiosyncrasies with the fast finality network in Espresso today. That's just one component of not only of the many things that the Espresso team is working on, but also of the whole pie, right? Of the whole set of modular components that make up a blockchain. And so, yeah, for us, it's obviously the most important thing to make progress everywhere.
And I think it helps you guys strike a balance between what is idealistic and what is pragmatic here
Yes,
now.
I think a great example of this is the sequencing technology on Arbitrum chains. We've talked for years about decentralized sequencing. I mean, Ben is probably one of the loudest folks in the ecosystem about this, especially a couple of years ago, right? I mean, it is a fascinating concept and will, at some point, in my view, be the way that these systems are run. But if you look at not only consumer-grade hardware, but particularly commercial-grade hardware that chains securing tens of billions of dollars need to run at a performance scale that we have become accustomed to in terms of fast block times and gas cost for users, if you want to make that system distributed today, users are going to feel pain. And is that a trade-off that DAO wants to make today? I would argue probably not. I think we know no, because a lot of proposals are not focused on that, right? And so eventually, when it is cheap enough and easy enough to deploy a distributed system that can maintain the type of performance we see, in a centralized sequencer, there will be a move. It is a simply better option. But until it becomes that, I think the focus is on adding better guarantees to the system, right? To make sure that the single party is held accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that is, kudos to not just Arbitrum, but like our entire industry about open sourceness and the open-mindedness to accept new technologies as they come up, even though they challenge the status quo.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like to think this as like a really solid stepping stone for Arbitrum as a whole, and then this next iteration of Espresso kind of brings a lot more to the table, as you're explaining, Ben, which can then even further take the next important step aligned with this core ethos that we laid out. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming out. I hope you had a great time in Bangkok.
Yeah.
And keep that 2 for 2 strong, all right?
All right, we'll make it work. Cheers, man.
Ben, we're trying to grill you too hard. We're just trying to understand what the hell's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was great. I didn't
Okay.
feel like you were grilling me too hard.